Have you ever wondered why finding a truly compatible partner feels harder than ever, despite dating apps, endless choices, and more independence than any generation before? Why is it that the more accomplished and self-sufficient you become, the fewer viable options seem to appear? It's not your imagination. There's a silent shift happening in the dating world, one that no one warned you about. And if you don't understand how the game really works, you could end up paying a price that no degree, no paycheck, and no self-growth can protect you from. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might see the whole landscape of love, dating, and commitment through a lens no one has ever handed you before.
So let's try to lay all of this out clearly. Given everything we've talked about so far, female hypergamy, young women outperforming young men, the shift in sexual market value over time, and the fact that most women still don't take the initiative when it comes to making offers, there are actually only a few logical ways this can all play out. Seriously, if you play the chessboard out 20 moves ahead, there are only 5 possible endgames for women in the current dating landscape. Now, I can't give you exact percentages for each scenario. Human behavior is messy, but some outcomes are far more likely than others. Let's walk through each of the 5 outcomes one by one. To start, keep in mind, high-performing, attractive young women, the ones who've crushed school, built careers, and look amazing, are setting the bar extremely high. Their success plus their hypergamous instincts means they're only open to dating men who are even more successful, attractive, or high status than they are. That makes the barrier to entry, the price tag, if you will, very steep, and the number of men who can clear that bar, very small. Meanwhile, the men these women want, the top 10% of men, are by definition doing even better. They have way more options, they're swimming in attention, and have absolutely no pressure to settle down. And here's where it gets ironic. The men women want most are the least likely to give them what they want. Let that sink in. Because from the high-value man's perspective, the demands women make, emotional support, commitment, monogamy, financial provision, are incredibly costly. And as a woman's SMV declines over time, those demands only grow more expensive for him. So again, if women don't make offers themselves, and if they keep aiming only for the top, this whole thing funnels into just 5 possible endings. Option A. Women keep their standards high, outcompete the rest, and successfully land a high-value man. Option B. Women lower their standards just enough to still land a high-value man, beating the competition by being more flexible. Option C. Women keep their standards high, fail to land a top-tier man, and end up settling for a lower-value partner. Option D. Women lower their standards, still fail to win over a top man, and settle for a low-value man. Option E. Women don't secure or settle. They stay single, unpartnered, and often childless. Those are the only 5 doors in this game. And now that we've laid them out, the question becomes, which ones are most likely? Let's apply a bit of economic thinking here. Imagine you're shopping. Would you ever pay more for the same exact product if you could get it somewhere else cheaper, faster, or with better service? Of course not. And that's why option A is the least likely outcome. If you're a woman keeping your price tag high while trying to attract men who have endless choices, you're fighting an uphill battle. Even if they can't afford it, most of them simply won't pay top price when they can get similar or even better deals elsewhere. Do people sometimes pay more for designer items? Absolutely. But that only works if the brand has proven time and time again that it's worth the premium. Like a Versace handbag. Most women don't need a $3,000 bag, but they want one because it signals something. Versace can charge that because it's the 1% of handbags. This is the same for a 1% woman. The truth is most women are not, so they lose out in the competition for the top 10% of men if they try to maintain luxury-level standards without being in that ultra-rare tier. So again, option A, where you keep your standards high and actually land the dream guy, only happens for around 1% of women. Now let's talk about option B, which is just slightly more likely. In this case, a woman still manages to secure a high-value man, but only after lowering her price tag a bit. Maybe she adjusts her expectations, maybe she softens on the idea of him needing to be 6 feet tall, or earning $300K a year, or being emotionally available 24/7. Whatever the adjustment is, she becomes more accessible. But even with this adjustment, we run into the same numbers problem. Remember, only 10% of men are in the high-value category to begin with, and even if every single one of them wanted to commit, which, let's be honest, they don't, only 10% of women could possibly be with them. If 1% of women get there through option A, then we're only left with about 6% of women who could realistically find success in option B. And that's being optimistic. It's also important to note, in option B, the woman is on sale. She's not getting the full sticker price she might have hoped for, but like a Versace outlet bag, she's still close enough to the luxury label that some top-tier guys will bite. Let's keep going. We've accounted for 7% of women so far. But what about the rest? Well, we know that 25% of women are unmarried by age 40, and that number has increased by 25% in just the last decade. So roughly 1 in 4 women are ending up in option E, single and often childless. That leaves a big group, roughly 2/3 of women who are ending up in either option C or option D. Now, let's break down those two. In option D, the woman lowers her standards, still doesn't secure a top man, and ends up with a low-value partner. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it happens, often out of necessity. Think of it this way. You're at the airport, you're starving, and your only option is a $20 mediocre sandwich. You don't want it, but going hungry for 12 hours feels worse, so you pay up for a disappointing meal. That's option D. Women choose it not because they want to, but because the fear of being alone outweighs the frustration of settling. Roughly 15% of women end up here, often because of biological clocks, social pressure, or simply running out of time and energy to keep playing the game. This brings us to...
All right, now we're down to the last two outcomes, option C and option E. We've already talked about option D, lowering standards and still ending up with a low-value man. It's not ideal, but for some women, it feels better than being alone. It's the sandwich you didn't want, but bought anyway. But what about option C? This is the more emotionally complicated one. In option C, a woman keeps her standards high, fights hard at the dating market, and doesn't get what she wants. She doesn't land the high-value guy. Instead, as time goes on, she slowly realizes she either missed her window or priced herself out. And so, eventually, she settles for someone she previously would have overlooked. This is where the inner conflict begins. Because settling doesn't come easy after years of believing you were meant for more. When you've been told your whole life that you deserve the best, it's hard to make peace with good enough. Especially if you spent your 20s turning down decent guys because you thought something better was just around the corner. This is where resentment can creep in. Maybe she resents her partner for not being the man she wanted to end up with. Or maybe she resents herself for not locking down someone earlier, for playing it too safe, for prioritizing other things. Either way, the relationship carries a kind of quiet disappointment. It's not terrible, but it's not satisfying either. So why does option C happen? Usually it's the result of timing. A woman may have had access to high-value men in her peak years, but she didn't secure any of them. Maybe she thought they'd always be there. Maybe she thought she had more time. But the harsh truth is that women's peak sexual market value is front-loaded in life. And if they don't act decisively during that window, options start to shrink fast. Option C is one of the most common outcomes. Many women end up here not because they're not attractive or intelligent or successful, but because they overestimated how long their leverage would last. And now we reach the final outcome, option E. The woman doesn't settle and ends up alone. Now, to be very clear, there is nothing wrong with being single. Some people thrive in solitude. They choose freedom, independence, and peace over the compromises that come with relationships. That can be a valid, even powerful life path.
But let's be honest, most women don't actually want this outcome. Very few women are 18 years old dreaming about a future where they're 40, unmarried, and childless. Even women who are killing it professionally, traveling the world, and building impressive lives often find themselves, at some point, wondering, is this really enough? Because eventually, the career accolades fade, the excitement of travel becomes routine, and the friends you partied with in your 20s start to disappearing into their own families. At that point, a quiet question starts to echo. Did I miss something? Option E is often the result of chasing perfection. These women never found a man who checked every box. And instead of adjusting expectations, they held out, waiting for the unicorn that never came. And over time, the dating pool got smaller, not just because they aged, but because the men available to them started looking for younger women, or had already settled down, or just weren't interested in playing the same game. So the options dried up. And now they're left with freedom, but not the kind they hoped for. It's not the wild, adventurous freedom of youth. It's the lonely kind. The one where no one texts you goodnight. Where holidays feel a little emptier each year. Where birthdays pass more quietly each year. That's option E. And again, this is not about shaming women. It's about offering clarity. If we don't talk about these outcomes honestly, women will keep making choices based on false assumptions. And those assumptions can lead to regret. Here's the core issue. The way many women have been taught to value themselves, through their achievements, independence, and standards, doesn't align with how the dating market actually works. This mismatch creates friction. It's not that your degrees, your job, or your confidence aren't valuable. They are, in life. But in the dating market, men aren't shopping for a resume. They're choosing a partner. And what men value in a partner isn't always what women have been told to emphasize. That's where the disconnect lies. So let's summarize. Option A, high standards, gets the top man, happens maybe 1% of women. Option B, slightly lower standards, gets a high-value man, happens for a few more, maybe 6%. Option C, keeps high standards and ends up settling, is one of the most common outcomes. Option D, lower standards and ends up with a low-value man, is another very common route. And option E, doesn't settle and ends up single and childless, is growing, especially among educated, high-achieving women. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what should women do? Here's the answer, and it's not easy to hear. You have to understand the market you're in. You have to stop making decisions based on how things should work and start responding to how things actually do. That means rethinking your standards, not because you're not worth the great partner, but because having unrealistic standards is the fastest way to lose the game. It also means being proactive. If women keep waiting for offers and refuse to make any themselves, they surrender their agency. In a competitive market, that's a losing strategy. And finally, it means making peace with trade-offs. There is no perfect person. Every path comes with cost. Every partner, yes, even the high-value ones, will disappoint you in some way. That's part of being human. But the longer you wait for perfection, the more likely you are to end up alone. So if you're a woman watching this, or if you love a woman who needs to hear it, remember, you are powerful. But your power comes from awareness, not denial. Know your value, but know the market too. And if you want love, family, connection, whatever it is, make decisions that move you toward those goals, not just ones that feel good in the moment. Because life doesn't reward potential, it rewards strategy. And in the dating market, as in life, the ones who win are the ones who adapt.